Test, test. Okay, that works.
There is a gain on it. Okay. Should be up pretty much close to the top. Yeah. So you got your tea. Is it lemon? Is there honey? Go ahead. Good evening. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm looking for a week, based on where we are, an appropriate greeting to give everybody. I guess it's still Shavua Tov territory, but it's Shabbat Shalom soon enough. Wishing everybody a good evening, and I'm glad that you could come out for the second session of our series. I can also say hello to all the folks out there in TV land. Pachot Yoter, we got a live stream going right now, so I don't know if that's Smile, you're on camera, but be aware that we do have a live stream running, and for those of you who are on the live stream, thank you, and if you can't, if you're here and for some reason you want to go back and view the live stream again later, we should be able to provide a link to our registrants for the recording. So be aware that that's out there, and if you're on and you get interrupted somehow, that's okay. If you want to let people know if there's anybody you've got who you want to give the link to, the very easy link is nhs-cba, for Congregation B'nai Avraham, .org/live, and that takes you right to our live stream. So I am Rabbi Noah Farah. I'm the rabbi here at Northern Hills, the spiritual leader at Northern Hills Synagogue. I'm also, I guess, the senior rabbi. When I took that title, we did not have more than one rabbi, so hence the title. But we also have an associate rabbi, Rabbi Sam Shapra, whom some of you know from around in the community. And it is my privilege to welcome you all here for the second session of our Z-Word series, presented by Rabbi Scott Shafran of Adath Israel, whom I have recently met just in the last few months and gotten to know as a colleague, and I think as a budding friend. There's a budding friendship there. We are very glad to entertain questions, interaction, all those sorts of things as they come up. And we do have a handheld mic here for those who will need it. I will be flitting about the sanctuary to some extent, acting as maybe the technology fairy a little bit, but also if anybody has needs, questions, and concerns, whether it's me or whether it's one of our ushers or security personnel, we've got people who should be able to answer. Everybody hopefully knows where the exits are. They're marked. Hopefully everybody also knows where the restrooms are. They are also marked, and you can find them out from the lobby. And thanks all for being here. I hope it's a good evening, and glad to be continuing this series with you.
Excuse me. Thank you to Rabbi Farah for inviting me here. Is it a
little too close?
It might be. Let me see. Hello? Better? I apologize for all of this. This is not a robot voice. This is the end stage of whatever horrible voice killing thing happened in my house over the weekend. And of course, this is the worst it's been. I appreciate you all being here. As Rabbi Farah said, my name is Rabbi Scott Shafran. I am the senior rabbi at Adath Israel, also the only rabbi at Adath Israel, although we do have a wonderful plethora of amazing rabbis who are members. It's really exciting for me to be able to be here. First of all, I have not actually been in this space, so it's really nice to be inside. I've driven past the building. But as someone who just moved to Cincinnati in January, it's great to be able to experience different parts of the community and to get to know some of you as well. First of all, how many of you were able to go to last week's session? How many people were able to be at last week's? So most of you, it looks like. the design of these sessions was to get our rabbis to be working together, our communities to be working together. They do not necessarily feed one off another. We kind of independently picked our topics. But I'm just curious, for the sake of continuity of conversation, what is something that you learned last week, or that you really came away from the learning last week? You all knew everything, nothing's new. Yes, please. And share your name too.
Oh, I'm Matt Lee from Northern Hills. Matt Lee from Northern Hills Synagogue. The importance of framework for discussing questions. If it's a yes, no, can you describe it in some other way to create space for dialogue?
Okay, great. Yeah. Yes, please.
Some useful ways to deconflict discussions with people that are potentially going to turn into something that isn't very nice.
Great. We're gonna talk about that a little, maybe flip it on its head a little bit today as well. Oh.
I'm Rebecca Axelrod from Adath Israel. I wish I could remember the phrase that names this, but that the phenomenon that when we're presented with evidence that supports the opposite view that we hold, that actually makes us hold on to our view more strongly instead of leading us to change our mind.
Absolutely. That is definitely something that many of us have experienced.
We also talked about phrases, certain phrases that have meaning, and in your frame of reference, it may have a different meaning than what someone else is talking about. I'm thinking of something like from the river to the sea.
Right.
You know, very phrases that can really bring up our shackles and stuff. And maybe it doesn't actually mean what the other person is thinking. So.
Absolutely. I saw a hand. Oh.
Well, it was just a phrase. If I think I want to discuss something with someone, it's wait. Why am I talking?
Wait. I like that. So a lot of good learning all around. And what I wanted to talk with everybody about today is using our own experiences, using our own understandings, our own passions around the topic of Zionism to be able to try and get ourselves out of our comfort zone. So I want us to do a little exercise together. Think about a time when you felt upset about something that was said about an issue that is meaningful to you. It can be anything. It can be something that was said directly to you. It can be something that you heard. But a time when you really cared about something and someone said something about that issue that very much upset you. I know you're going to have to think about this for a while. That kind of thing never happens. Just as long as you have it in your mind. I don't want us to share exactly what it was, just to have in your frame of reference. I want you to think back, put yourself in that space where you heard something that very much upset you about an issue you care about. What was the feeling like? In your brain, in your body, what does that experience feel like to you?
I don't even like it.
Okay. All right.
Like a part of my soul was crushed. Like, how could someone have such a view that was so contrary to me? How could they be on a different planet? And like, I don't know how to handle it.
Yes. I think you said that really nicely. I'm going to repeat for emphasis. How could somebody have such a different view than I had? It's like they're on a different planet. It's like the reality they are experiencing is not the reality that you are experiencing. Beautiful. What else? Yeah, Gilda. Yeah. So relationship matters a lot. That's what Gilda was saying, is that the relationship you have to the person or group, I guess, that is saying something that really raises your ankles matters. If my brother is sitting next to me on the couch and says something I disagree with, I mean, maybe brother's a bad example because I might just like smack him in the head, but if my best friend says something that I really disagree with, I am confident we can have a conversation about that. And it's not that I'm going to get him to agree or not, but I am confident there's very few things that someone could say in that kind of relationship that just blows up everything and we won't be able to talk anymore. It's possible, but less likely. If I hear something on the radio that some random stranger who represents some organization I've never heard of says, I mean, I'll probably just change the channel because I don't want to listen to that anymore. So the relationship matters a lot. Yeah.
I can also speak loudly.
All right.
Former kindergarten. Jan from Valley.
Thank you, Jan.
You kind of mentioned it, but regardless of the relationship, with me, it's if someone said something, it's like, where do I start? There are so many parts of what you just said that I don't agree with, that I would like to know where the heck you figured that out. And it just makes me silent.
Where do I start is the perfect question. We're hopefully going to give you some answers to that question tonight. So one of the big questions, when you hear something that really sets you back or that you very much disagree with, where do I start? Yeah.
My name is Linda Chatterjee. I'm from Rockdale. I also teach nonviolent communication. So I'm going to stick with feeling words like confused and hurt. And I often feel scared. I'm scared about losing the relationship. I'm scared about someone meaning harm to me. So that's my biggest feeling, I think.
Yeah. Those are important to acknowledge and recognize as well. Oh. All right, I'll stay over here.
Sometimes if I'm talking to someone,
All right. Thank you.
That's great. I want to make sure folks know, when you are speaking, since we do have the stream going, folks on the stream are not going to be able to hear comments and questions very clearly unless you do speak into the mic. And for some of our folks around, it can really help. We also do have a T-coil system here in the sanctuary, so if you have hearing aids that are compatible with T-coil, you will be able to use that as well to help pick that up. Sorry.
recently I talked to two people on two separate occasions who are both very, very bright. And my first thought is, how can someone who's so smart be so dumb?
Yeah.
And how do you convince someone who is this smart? Like, how do you there's no way, and sometimes what I just think is you can't have a rational conversation with someone who's irrational.
How do you have a rational conversation with someone who's irrational? That's a great question. And also, I think you made a really big point. Most people are not idiots. They are not evil. They are not manipulative. Obviously, there are some people who are all of those things. But most people, turns out, have similar wants and human needs, have similar goals, have similar values. What is different is how we understand the world, how we get to those values, what we feel is important. That's where the conflict happens. Yeah. Oh, you're sorry. Thank you, I appreciate it. I thought you were standing up to make a very passionate statement. I want us to stay with some of those thoughts. And for tonight's conversation, we're going to be primarily focusing on how do we have conversations within a Jewish context. So a lot of times when we talk about relationship with Israel or Zionism or dealing with different current events, a lot of the conversation has to do with, like, how do we explain our Jewish experience to people who are not Jewish, to organizations that have different priorities, to people who do not have that same perspective. Or sometimes in reacting, how do we react when the outside world says or does things that raise our ankles, the way we were talking about. But I also think that, especially in the last few years, but it's something that's been going on probably for the last 20 years, within the Jewish community, there's been a lot of difficulty in having a nuanced gray area and broad-ranging conversation about what it means to have a relationship with Israel, whether you're an American Jew, whether you're an Israeli, whether you are young or old or what have you. And I think it's really important to acknowledge some of those difficulties and to try and talk about, well, what does it mean to build in 2025-26 an ongoing and developing relationship as a Jewish person with the state of Israel, with the people of Israel, with world Jewry. So that's going to be my primary focus for tonight. Like Rabbi Farah was saying, please feel free, if at any point as I'm going along you have questions, interrupt me, raise a hand, throw a shoe. As you can see, my voice is not meant to carry this conversation, and so hopefully you'll join me a little bit. And we'll try and work through both some big theory ideas, but also some like very practical how-to helpful hints, or at least I hope they're helpful. Oh no. I misestimated the size of the slide. So what we have here is 97% of a quote from Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory. And he is, what did I know? It's okay. I can paraphrase. The first word is Moses, not Oses. He's talking about this idea of arguing with God. And he jumps off from actually, I think he's in Parshat Shemot. And he says, Moses in Parshat Shemot is arguing with God. God wants him to go and lead the Jewish people, and he argues repeatedly. I don't want to. I'm not the right person. Surely there's somebody better. I'm very hard of speech. Maybe I'm not the one who should be leading the conversation, ironically. And Rabbi Sacks says, well, he's not the only one who has this point of view. Abraham, many generations before, argues with God. Prophets like Jeremiah and Habakkuk argue with God. Are you sure you want to do this? Jonah famously yells at God after running away from God, saying, I know what you're going to do, God. You're going to be all compassionate and forgive them, and I don't want to have any part of forgiveness. We can talk about Jonah later. But his main points are that actually this is not a bug, but a feature of the system in Torah. That God actually wants people who can argue with God, not just people who will carry out God's wills unquestionably. And why? Well, he says, firstly, only God can see the totality of truth. When I read that the first time, I was blown away. Most of you don't know me well, but were to look inside of my head, you would see that I generally think I am right and have very strong opinions about all the stuff, everything. Sometimes I air those opinions, like for weekday shachrit, we should use weekday shachrit nusach. Other times I keep those opinions in my head because I don't think they are helpful to share. But I am very strongly opinionated. I'm a middle child. And reading that reminds me of something that I practice professionally as a rabbi, but don't always use in my personal life, which is I know that I have been blessed with having brilliant teachers who've taught me a lot of things, and there's a billion texts I haven't even looked at yet that I've never read and will never get to. And I'm going to try my best to keep learning things, but I will never know all the things, Jewishly or otherwise. And then I turn on the news, and I have lots of opinions about all the things on the news. And I have to remember that I don't have access to the totality of truth. That's not to say that our individual experiences and opinions are not valid. Far from it. What it is trying to say is that if we take seriously our own opinions, experiences, and ideas, then we are required to take other people's equally seriously. And that's hard. I have this idea of like plotting all of the different opinions on an issue in different colors on a grid and zooming out, and what you'd see is some beautiful mosaic picture. Something that is so incredible I can't possibly see. But he doesn't stop there. He says, not only is it that we're not ever able to see the totality of truth, it's that justice presupposes our ability to hear another side. Not community building, not human relationships, justice. If we consider ourselves people who are moving the universe around us toward a more just universe, it requires us to listen to and take seriously other people's thoughts and opinions. Not agree, not give up our own opinions, but actually take seriously things that we disagree with. And that's incredibly difficult, especially when we're talking in an intra-community perspective. Yes, please.
There is a problem in what you're advocating.
Lots of them.
I'm sure there are many. Thank you. Thanks, Bob. And that is where the frustration comes is not from a recognition that other people don't have opinions or other people aren't entitled to opinions, but that when you're listening to the person, you recognize that the information base upon which they have drawn their opinions is either limited, slanted, skewed, or whatever you want to call it, and the recognition that you can't move the understanding process forward without everybody being on the same page from an information standpoint. You know, and I can be not on the same, and I have lots of opinions too, by the way. He does. He knows. Bob knows. And I don't have all, you know, even though I have all the facts, I don't always have them. I know that. But the frustration point, the problem point, especially talking about the issue that we're having here, and you hear a lot of opinions in the world, you know, and this is true both on the left and the right, you know, that you see the information base on which they are drawing is limited, and therefore you don't know how to engage. Well, let's just sit down here and start from the very beginning, and let's have a tutorial. And those things are not generally a feasible process. So
Right.
There's a frustration in there because of you can figure out pretty fast that limitation.
Beautiful. You said a couple of really important words, which I want to repeat. Frustration. That was the key one that you repeated several times. It is very frustrating to do any of this work that I'm suggesting we do. It is not easy. And you are absolutely correct that a lot of people, myself included, we form opinions without necessarily knowing all the facts. What Rabbi Sachs is arguing is that no one actually ever knows all the facts. Some people know more facts or enough facts to actually make a salient opinion, but we all only have the information that we have. And I don't know if you've ever tried this before. Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody where you actually oh, I just read this book that actually explains that actual thing perfectly. Let me tell you what I learned. How excited are they to hear the thing you just learned from this book when they disagree with you? Not very at all. Let me tell you something else that I have experienced. Before I moved here, for 2 years before that, I worked at the JCRC in St. Louis. So I spent a lot of time at Jefferson City, at the Missouri State Capitol, talking with legislators, working on different issues that were important to our community. And there was one point where we were working with a bunch of educators and a lot of high school students to talk about education bills that were on the floor. Some of them were really important, especially in how we teach history, in how we integrate students. And I had a group of high schoolers with me, and we were going to everyone on the education subcommittees to talk with them, to tell them how important these bills were to us. And I managed to sneak in and grab one of the ranking members as he was trying to go home. And I felt kind of bad about that. But he saw I was with these students, and he made time for us. This person could not have disagreed with me more. And for everything, I thought he was very, I just walked into his office, and I saw the way his office was set up, and I was like, oh, we already disagree. And yet, miracles from heaven. And yet, he sat down with us, we had a whole conversation, and I asked him, so how did you get onto this education committee? Like, you're, a veteran state senator, like, clearly you can have your pick of whatever committees you want to be on. And he said, it's because I care about kids. I want our kids to grow up successful and have good jobs and make sure that they can, go into the world and live a good life. And I was like, exactly. That's the best thing I've ever heard in my whole life. And we sat down, and he listened to these students, he listened to me. Do I think I changed his vote? Probably not. But I could call him, and he would answer my call because I sat down and listened to what he cared about. And that, for me, was really important. It was a formative, life-changing type of conversation. My point is not that by listening carefully to other people and taking it seriously, they're going to do what you say, or they're going to agree with you. My point is that by not having those conversations, you'll never have any agreement with anyone ever. That's a depressing thought. But it is true that if we are not willing to at least consider each other's opinions, or at least consider that the person you're talking to or group you're talking to very deeply holds their opinions just like you deeply hold yours, then we're not going to be able to ever find common ground.
People aren't moved by facts, they're moved by stories. And we all have the same basic human needs, like safety and love and belonging and stuff like that. So start there.
Yeah. People aren't moved by facts, they're moved by stories. And I want to tell you guys a little story to help us move into this conversation. So I wanted to share some quotes. These are quotes from leaders in the Jewish community talking about their own experiences. And I'm hoping that some of them sound familiar to you, either as something you have felt or experienced or something you have heard. So this is one from an article that I read a few months ago. As a child, Judaism and Zionism were synonymous. I had no sense of one ended or where the other began. Has anybody ever heard or felt something like that? I have definitely heard it and seen that. I go to my synagogue and they talk about Israel, I'm not surprised. I go to camp and there's programs about Israel, totally fits. I have falafel and I'm excited about it. Makes me feel Jewish.
I think 90% of Israelis feel that way.
Yeah, certainly it's something very common for Israelis, but even in this country, I would say certainly historically since the 67 war, most of world Jewry had this sense that like Judaism and self-determination in the land of Israel were linked. That was kind of a turning point for most of the Jews in the world. Living in Israel or visiting Israel, I experienced what I had always longed for, a unified people. Jews there simply exist. Differently than in other countries where you have to be a Jewish American or a Jewish Hungarian or a Jewish French person.
I didn't hear that phrase or that quote when I was growing up, but that's exactly the way I felt the first time I landed in Israel. For once, I looked like a Sabra, I looked like everybody else and not my non-Jewish friends.
Yeah.
Not that every Jew looks that way.
So, growing up as an American Jew, Israel is absolutely part of your consciousness. And your role going out into the world is to fight battles on campuses and defend Israel. Anybody ever heard that? Oh, I heard that a lot. Growing up, I heard that a lot. People will not understand why you care about Israel, and so your role as a Jewish person is to defend Israel. Therefore, not defending Israel is abdicating your role. There's a lot of training I got at religious school, at camps, BBYO, which is the youth group I was a part of. That was like, you should understand Israel because people out there don't. Just like if you were someone who had, family who was from Iraq or India or any other country other than one you're living in, You can't expect people to understand your connection with that place or its history. So you need to know more than the average person so you can talk about it. Because it turns out the rest of the world expects you to. They expect you to, by being Jewish, have some connection to Israel and be its defender. Fair or not. But I know that there's a lot of consternation from people who grew up in spaces like this, that they don't hear that kind of talk from people now. That people don't have that same feeling within the Jewish community. And sometimes people get frustrated when people say things like this. I sometimes find it hard to support the actions taken by Israel and the Israeli government. There's a survey that Jewish Federations of North America did in, I want to say 2020 or 2021, and that was one of the questions. Guess how many percentage of the people said that they agreed with that statement? It was definitely over 50. It was about 68%. More than 2/3.
You could say how many Israelis feel like that.
They asked that question too. I don't remember what the percentage was, but they did ask the question of Israeli Jews as well.
So the first statement I hear often from our son, who is 27, grew up with a Jewish day school education, Jewish camps, et cetera, and now he feels like he's been brainwashed.
Yeah.
Which is devastating, but understandable, because there was never a separation of the Israeli people, Jewish people, and the government. And it's hard to not convince him, but give him a different opinion, which I do share his opinion, but
Yeah.
I don't know how to react to that.
It's very hard because on the one hand, as Jewish parents, Jewish communal leaders, as people involved in Jewish community, here and everywhere else in the world, it's hard to think about being Jewish and not having some connection to the state of Israel. It's been such a part of the Jewish people for the last 3,000 years. It's so baked into everything we do. I mean, we face in a direction towards where Israel is. It's in our liturgy up and down. All of our sacred texts make reference to the land. Like, it's hard to think about not having some sort of positive association. And yet, there are times when we ourselves may struggle. But it's different for, I think, people who went through a different age and time because we had all these years of building up positive connections. It's like living in this country. Do you live in this country and agree with everything that every administration does? Of course not. But you are a patriotic citizen of this country. And so when you criticize the government, it's not because you're anti-American. It's because you love America and want it to be better. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish when someone in the Jewish community is criticizing something about Israel or its government. Are they doing it out of love, or are they trying to say, I'm done with Israel? And that doesn't always come through. That's a very fine line to walk, and it's, as you're saying, understandable but devastating.
I have a comment here.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm going to build up on my colleague Jeff Basson over there.
Yeah.
Most of what you quote is traditional, old-time stuff that we would read in any old historical document. Nowadays, we live in a different world. We used to have one radio station or one or two papers. We could read the same piece of news, and then we could have an intelligent argument about it.
Right.
Nowadays, we have these toys, and you just listen to what you want to hear.
Yeah.
And so you can't have an intelligent conversation, and I think that is something we should consider when we discuss things today, as opposed to even 10 years ago.
Yeah, we're going to get back to like where we get our information or experiences from, though. I think that's a huge point. This is something I hear all the time. Also.
Hi, I'm Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
From Adith Israel. I am thinking from a different perspective. Sometimes I have to have conversations with myself, especially now because of what's going on with the war. And when you had that other piece up there, and it said, always in the name of justice, that's the part that I'm struggling with today, arguing with myself about actions on both sides.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this, but I am.
So you said almost exactly what this third quote says, which is from a colleague of mine who wrote an article saying, "I will not hesitate to reaffirm my support for the rights of Jews to self-determination, but I cannot ignore violations of Jewish values. We should not justify human rights offenses in Israel or anywhere else." When you just lay it out like that, it says, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But experientially, that's not as easy to do. There is a definite strain within the Jewish community, whether it is overtly stated or covertly felt, that even if you have a problem with something, even if something seems like a government action that doesn't accord to Israel's values or is not strategic, or things that are happening within Israeli society or whatever it is, saying that out loud, publicly, as a Jewish person, is in some ways uncomfortable or at worst traitorous. What's worse is that there are people and organizations within the Jewish community who will say to you, not supporting Israel publicly or saying anything that is critical of Israel as a Jewish person is traitorous. And that shuts down all conversation. It is whatever Israel does, it's for the right. But Israel's a country. It's made up of people. People make mistakes, either on purpose or accidentally. If I were to say that same thing about America or any other country, people would look at me like I had two heads. Everything that the leaders of this country do is for the good? Really? Even my most favorite politicians of all time, and I do have favorites, did not do all the things I wanted them to do. That's okay. It's harder when it comes to Israel because we're not just talking about a country. We're talking about people. When I think about Israel, I'm not thinking about Bibi Netanyahu necessarily. I'm thinking about my cousins. I'm thinking about friends. It's different because it feels like there is a deeper tie, and also that it's not as stable. Criticizing America, America's been going for 250 years now. It's fine. It's not going to fall apart. Or maybe it will. Who knows? But there is a sense, Israel's only not even a 100-year-old country. Every threat seems like an existential threat. And some of that is a legacy of inherited Jewish trauma for the last several thousand years. And some of it has to do with the way that we talk about Jewish identity as well. That Jewish identity itself is sometimes felt as though it is hanging by a thread, both in this country and other places. We have to continually justify our sense of identity to ourselves and to other people. And that makes discussion really hard. But I'm hoping that before we finish up, we can get some ideas of how to maybe do that. So, this I got from a colleague of mine who spent her graduate thesis looking at the troubles in Ireland and Northern Ireland, and how conflict resolution in that context paved the way for actual, sustainable relational peace, and what lessons you can use from that to talk about interpersonal conflict. Not violent, bloody upheaval, but just how we talk to other people. And one of the things she was saying is that when we hear things that upset us, notice our reactions. How does our face, voice, or gestures change? What does our body feel like? Does our heart rate jump up? Does it feel sick to our stomach? Do we want to run away physically? Notice those things. And that is a gut check for yourself. Not that anything is right or wrong, but just noticing the discomfort. And she would argue leaning into that. Yes.
Could you put it back? Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Under motor behavior, fight, flight, freezing, and fawning. Could you tell me more about fawning?
So these are typical semi-thoughtful responses to this kind of conflict when you notice that you are uncomfortable. So fighting is obviously, you get right back in their face and tell them they're wrong. Flight, running away. Freezing, you don't know what to do. Fawning is when you are presented with someone who has a very strong opinion, instead of engaging with the crux of that opinion, it's complimenting the person so they will feel like you are on their side even if you're not. It's another way of avoiding. So you're not totally running away from the conversation. You're saying like, oh, it seems like you've had a lot of thought put into this. Like you really seem to care about this issue a lot. I respect your candor. I appreciate that you're so passionate about this issue. So who likes puppies? It's a way to diffuse the tension you're feeling without actually engaging in a conversation. One thing that a couple of people mentioned is like our reaction when these things come up. It takes less than a second for our amygdala, the part of our brain that is the most primitive and reactionary, to take over when we sense an emergency. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes to recover. And your brain does not distinguish between an avalanche and someone saying words in terms of the relative danger. When you have that feeling that your physical body or your identity are under threat, your body reacts as though they were both life-threatening, which is really stupid of our bodies to do. But it's something to notice about ourselves too. So a lot of you have mentioned, like, I don't know what to do in these circumstances when someone is very different than us. A lot of times, we get stuck on the top level of what's your position on an issue? What is your position on the latest news item? What is your position on this action that the Israeli government has taken? And we don't get beyond that because the other person's position is so opposite ours or so unthinkable to us, as a few of you have mentioned. But there's a way to dig into why do you have that position? To get down to, all right, you've stated a clear position. How did you get that? Did you read something? Did you learn something? Do you know something that I don't know? Why do you want to take the position you've taken? And beneath that, why someone takes a position, is a set of needs. Having that position meets some need. So if I say, I am in favor of free pizza for everyone, that meets two different needs. One is a need to make sure that people have equal access to food, and the other is an ongoing and all-consuming need for pizza, which is something I deal with every day. But the thing is, we sometimes don't get to the needs. And you might say, well, how are we going to, Rabbi, how are we going to dig into somebody's psyche and get to what their deepest, darkest needs are? You're not. But there's a really simple phrase that I can teach you that will help you get from the position to the why to the underlying need. The first phrase is, tell me more about that. You have no idea how nice it is for someone to say, tell me more about that. That's true whether you're telling a story about like your kid's kindergarten piano recital or about this very important stance you have on Israel. If you say something that you are maybe even nervous to say, especially if it's like kid to parent, and the reaction you get is, I'm not sure what you mean. Tell me more about that. Or, I don't quite understand. Tell me more about that. Oh my gosh. There's nothing better than an invitation to conversation. Please.
Another phrase that I sometimes will use is, help me understand.
Help me understand. Oh, that's a good one. I like help me understand. It does not commit you to agreeing to anything they're saying. And it also says like, I believe that you got to that opinion through some valid synthesis of information and experience. and I want to understand it, because I'm not there. And maybe you'll get down to it, and I will say, oh, the thing you need is not something I think is a valid need. Maybe you will say, the thought process you went on is misunderstanding the facts or cluing into things that aren't actually there. And maybe we can talk about that, maybe not. But at least I will get why it is you're saying what you're saying or thinking what you're thinking. This is also like a chart of our kind of reactions to things. When someone says something that we very much disagree with, often we will describe ourselves as being angry or frustrated. I think a few of you use the word frustrated, similar words. But there's a rage. There's a lot of different levels to angry. You can feel angry because you feel that that person having that opinion betrays your relationship. You can feel angry because you feel duped or tricked. That it uncovers something about that person or organization or group that you didn't know. You can feel angry because you feel disempowered. This comes up a lot when we talk about people who maybe have a minority opinion in either a larger group or when they hear from their official leaders, be it rabbis, organizational leaders, parents, whoever, that their opinion isn't welcome. That leads to anger about feeling disempowered and also devalued and disrespected. So a lot of what I'm trying to get us to lay the ground for is this idea of managing our own emotional responses. It's the hardest thing. Getting someone else to talk about their opinions, not hard. Very simple. If you show willingness to listen, people will talk about their opinions all day long. The hard thing is, how do we hear those opinions and manage our own reactions to them? For me, this is the thing I struggle with most. And I will give you some, behind the scenes inside information. As a rabbi, people tell me upsetting things all the time. Personally upsetting things, politically upsetting things, community upsetting things, every flavor of upsetting thing. And if someone tells me their upsetting thing that they need to talk to their clergy person about, and my reaction is, oh my God, what? No, that would be bad. They would leave angry and disempowered and disrespected and frustrated. But it's easier to do that when it's somebody that's in our own lives. It's a friend or a kid or a spouse or a colleague. It's easier to react without that kind of understanding. So these are two other helpful skills. When you're having a conversation with someone who very much disagrees with you, try to draw them out. How did you get to that? Tell me more about that. I want to understand what you mean by that. And also restating. I can't tell you how helpful a tool restating is. What I hear you say is blank. And then that gives the person a chance to say, no, that's not actually what I meant. You would be shocked how often what you hear is not what somebody said. And part of the problem is vocabulary. A lot of us use words or phrases or ideas, and a few of you hit on this, that for us mean one thing, and for the person saying it means something totally different. I mean, even the whole name of this series, we called it the Z word, because when I say Zionism, it doesn't necessarily mean what other people mean when they say Zionism. And I would love to believe that words have meanings that you can find in a dictionary and we could all agree to them, but that's not the reality. And so we really need to drill down and be certain. And by restating what you just heard is a great way for the person to feel that you've listened. Even if you get it wrong. Even if you say, what I heard you say is this. And they're like, no. You totally missed it. They know you're trying to hear them. They know you're trying to understand them. That's very helpful in helping the conversation move forward. So here's some examples. Drawing them out, using clarifying questions. What did you mean by that? Could you give me an example? How would you describe that? What are your reasons? Tell me more. Restating is exactly what you're saying. What you were saying was this. What I'm hearing you say is It seems like your main concern is blank. It's a really good way to get to values. The other thing is, a lot of the time, when we are dealing with our relationship to Israel or current events about Israel, we're not having dialogue. We're not. We're having monologues together. I can't tell you how many times I've been in rooms exactly like this, or smaller rooms, where we're all sitting around the table. And the goal is to have a conversation about helping each other build up community conversations around Israel. And we start talking, and it devolves into a series of monologues. I heard this from my kid, and you wouldn't believe what they're saying now. I read this on the internet, and everyone's posting a blah, blah, blah. There was these people out in the streets, and they're saying blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't help. That serves a need to let out steam about certain things, to have people feel your pain or your frustration at certain things. But that's not actually a conversation or a dialogue that moves anything forward. If we're frustrated by opinions or by the general consensus of conversation, it can only be improved by conversations that are two-way. If I want you to listen to me and take me seriously, I have to also listen and take you seriously. So these are the kinds of questions. These are just random examples of questions that can help people feel brought into a conversation. What concerns arise when you've discussed Israel-Palestinian relations with other people? What has the discourse been like for you? Given where you are in your network, in your community, what role do you want to play in sharing opinions with other people? What would happen in a discussion to make you feel ready to take on a leadership role? This I'm not going to get too far into. I thought it was a really interesting idea, but it's about how we do feedback loops. If you're not familiar with feedback loops, basically, we have our thinking, our assumptions and beliefs about the world. They lead us to certain actions, and that leads to certain outcomes. So if I think that, I'll stick with wine now. If I think that pizza is delicious, and I believe it is the best food, then my action will be that I will eat pizza every day, because that is clearly the correct choice. But I get some feedback in that I feel horrible all the time because I eat pizza every day. So a single loop learning is like, oh, I need to adjust my behavior and only have pizza like every other day. A double loop learning would be, I need to re-examine my assumption that pizza is the best food and perhaps have a salad once in a while. That's a silly example. But I think too often it's hard for us to revisit our assumptions about things that are really important to us. And I'll give you a personal example that was really painful for me. I grew up with the assumption that by creating a state of Israel, we were taking all of our Jewish inherited traditions and values and ethics and creating an Or Lagoy, a light unto the nations, a state that would try to be better than other states and more ethical and would live according to the highest of Jewish values. And we could debate on what those were, and we could figure out different customs, how to live, but that it would be a place for all Jews according to our Jewish values. That was my assumption. And there's a reality that I don't believe that Israel has always lived up to that. And acknowledging that for me is possibly the most painful Jewish conversation of my whole life. It is not comfortable for me to think and feel those things. I don't like it at all. It's very difficult. It started for me when I was in rabbinical school and living in Israel. And I remember the first time I went to Israel, I was a teenager, and I had the Israel teen trip experience. I got off the plane, my feet touched the ground. I'm like, oh my God, this is where all the stories happened. Like, Abraham was walking like just over there. This is the same dirt. You know, I had a tour guide who pulled us over on the road from the airport and was like, hey guys, walk up this hill. And we walked up the hill, and there was like artifacts on this random hill off of a road. And I'm like, that is incredible. You know, you go to the Kotel and you touch the stones, and you're like, I've read about these stones. And it's breathtaking. And you meet people, and you eat all the food, and you eat a lot of the food. No pizza. But, well, as an aside, people ask me as a rabbi all the time, like, oh, when you go to Israel, like, what kinds of things do you do? I'm like, you don't want to take my trip to Israel. It's all about hanging out with my cousins and eating like 17 meals a day. That's all. No history. I've done the history. Like, I just eat all the food. But I had that experience. And then I'm living in Israel, and it's 2010. And I am studying 1,000,000 hours a day to become a rabbi, this thing I really want to be. And I'm living in the Jewish homeland, a state that does not recognize my conservative Masorti rabbinical ordination, or the fact that my wife is also studying to be a rabbi. And that was very painful. I remember having conversations with colleagues of, I love this place, I love its history, I love its people, I have so much relationship built into this, and it doesn't love me back in the same way. And what do I do with that? That for me was a personal struggle. It didn't make me feel less connected to Israel. It didn't dim my support of Israel or what I perceive as my Zionism, but it was hard. It was painful, experientially. And I know that a lot of people are having similar struggles for a number of different reasons. Part of our American Jewish experience in our community is to be a place where people can feel safe being Jewish, especially when they disagree. And I think that one of the ways that we help that happen is by having more conversations and not discouraging disagreement. Sorry, you've been waiting very patiently.
And I don't want to think about
Hi, Brian.
you are touching on something which relates to why certainly I'm here and why I'm guessing a lot of people are here. And since we're talking about some psychological concepts, let me throw out the one of dissonance. You know, and I mean, throw out even a deeper word, and that is one of betrayal. And that is, as I've been coming to, and I want to point out, I'm Zionist to my core. My son made Aliyah. He served in the IDF. He still lives there. We're expecting our first grandchild in Israel in March. All that goes on with that. But the point is that the realization that the Israel I dreamed of and the Israel that I told myself about and the Israel that is, and especially what we've seen over the last few years, ain't the same. And I'm wrestling with that.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about how to have a dialogue with somebody. I'm worried about having a dialogue with myself. You know,
100%.
And I don't know how to. I need some help here. I don't know how to do it. You know, and I'm going to say something people in this room are probably going to hate me for saying, in that before the war started in October of 23, we were planning in this community a very big community mission to Israel. We had a very big one in 2016. I wasn't able to go. I had a conflict. I was very much looking forward to go, and I've gone to Israel many, many times.
Yeah.
And I viewed that trip as a chance to say goodbye to the Israel we dreamed of. Because we go around these places, we do this. My wife had a great time on the 2016 trip, all that goes along with that. But the realization, this is even before the war started, that wasn't it. Yeah. And I was in my head starting a process of trying to figure this whole thing out. And only it's gotten worse. And this is why I'm looking for some wisdom from all you rabbis in terms of how to deal with this in myself. Now, in terms of talking to other people, you know, you were talking about trying to have dialogue and coming together and so forth, whereas I'm mostly thinking about how do I go beat that person, and how do I go have an argument and show that person to be an utter fool. That's a thing that I'm trying to do separately, and that's not what we're about here. But But I am more about right now trying to reconcile within me, and I'm not doing real well.
Yeah.
And so that's just the way it is.
I think you hit on an amazing point, which is that the inner dissonance that we feel when we firmly believe one thing and also believe something that's completely at odds with it. I think that a lot of the same skills we're talking about when we have to hear someone else's view that we don't agree with, we can have that kind of conversation with ourselves, which is, why do you think that? Tell me, myself, more about why I think this. Why do I think that the Israel that we're living in is not the Israel of my dreams? Why do I think that it's important that the Israel I dreamed about is a value? It's not easy to have those conversations. I agree with you. I think it's also really important to balance out what the world is that we're living in and understand how it is we move from that world to the world of our goals. 100%. I absolutely agree.
Well, to sort of build on what was said there, I made Aliyah in the 70s. And the one thing I will say, the vast majority of the Westerners who made Aliyah, particularly Americans, left within 1, 2, 3 years. The Israel that they were seeing, this is the 1970s, not what you see today.
Right.
The reality of living in Israel, which did not meet up to the expectations that they were expecting from Israel, was basically, it was cognitive dissonance, that they just couldn't handle those differences. I mean, we left for a totally different reason and wanted to go back, but I'm not going to go into that whole story. But the vast majority, they just couldn't handle the day-to-day life of Israel. I mean, of the pushing, of the shoving, of the loudness, of the, I mean, my classic example is I went in, I needed a key, real simple, need a key for an apartment. Went to a locksmith, he made the key. Key didn't work. Here, you go back to the locksmith, say, hey, the key doesn't work. Okay. Well, he looked at me, he said, why doesn't it work? I said, it doesn't work. So I said, okay, new key. He made me a new key, went back. Still didn't work. I took it back. He said, bring the lock. I said, well, I can't bring the lock since it's the lock on my door. And if I don't lock the door, the apartment's open. Well, I can't do anything for you, and that'll be, and he wanted to charge me for the additional keys. These are things, I mean, I'm raising a really trivial type of issue, but this is a thing that many people, at least us in the West, or we in the West, proper grammar, are, no, not necessarily, are so used to. It's ingrained in us that if it's not done right, we'll get it done right and not a problem. And that's a problem that does not happen in Israel. And it really creates a problem for many people when they see the reality of Israel versus what they felt should be what Israel is.
Right. No, and that's a reality too, I think, for all of us understanding that Israel plays both a value role in our Jewish identity and an actual role in our Jewish identity. It's important to understand the distinction that, we have this idea, Kol Yisrael, Arim Zeh, like all of the Jewish people are connected and we take care of each other and that we're this interconnected web. And also, people who are living in Israel are not living lives that we are living here, which you could say about any two countries as like a truism, but it's different because we feel ownership of Israel the way I don't feel ownership about like Jews living in China or Jews living in Iceland. I feel like I have more buy-in and more say or more ownership of the Jewish experience in Israel than in someplace else.
So this has been really valuable in terms of the kind of tools we can use in our interpersonal communications. But one of the things that I'm really interested to hear you talk about, if you're willing to do it, is how we deal with the institutions in the American Jewish community that hold the power levers, where it is not only something, I mean, you can't even talk about it, you know, professionally, it becomes at risk. So that's my question.
It's a beautiful question. And my answer is similar but slightly different. So obviously when you're talking to a person, that's a different sort of interaction than when you're thinking about, well, how do I deal with an organization that has their own sets of principles, rules, things like that. And organizations are made up of people. So my background and experience for the last, how old am I? For the last 20 years or so is as a community organizer. So I have a lot to say about how do you deal with institutions and influencing them to do this, that, or the other thing. And the way you do it, there's only two ways: relationship and power. No one is going to listen to you if you don't have a relationship with them. So if you, I don't want to pick on any particular organization, but like if you go to your synagogue and you show up every single day, you come to every single program, and you approach the board of the synagogue and say, I have a real thing to discuss with you, guess what? They're going to listen to you because they know you really well, and they have to build this relationship with you. And if you show up with 300 other people and say, we have something to talk to you about, guess what? They're going to listen to you because you have all of that people power. It's the same thing with any organization. Organizations, especially Jewish communal organizations, at their core are meant to serve Jewish communal interests. That's why they're all created, whether it's a synagogue or broader nationwide organizations or some small organization that's serving a very particular mission. They all have somewhere in their mission statement that their goal is to serve Jewish communal interests. And so sometimes you have to remind them what the interests are, because otherwise they're just assuming. And I will say that as somebody who is in leadership of a Jewish communal organization here in Cincinnati, when people tell me what they care about, even if I disagree, that is the most valuable feedback. It is so valuable, because otherwise I'm assuming or guessing. Absent actual data or information about what people care about, I am assuming what people care about and what's important to them. But if you tell me, then I know. And maybe not everyone has that inclination. I fully acknowledge that not everyone is as excited about potentially uncomfortable feedback as I might be. But every Jewish communal professional I have ever met in my entire life fully believes that their job and their work is to make Jewish community better and to help us live out our values. Period. I've never met somebody who doesn't at some level believe that. And so if you want them to change how they're doing things or change their messaging or change the way that things are operating, it takes a lot of these conversations. It takes bringing people together. It takes serious discussions of not only what our purpose, but what our strategies to get to that purpose. I'm a very strategic thinker. If we're doing things that don't end up getting us from where we are to a certain goal, we shouldn't do them. That may sound obvious, but it is a little bit simplistic. And so helping have those conversations about how do we get to those big community goals is incredibly valuable. I wanted to share a kind of final thought, and then I'm happy to take some other questions and things as well. I want to be sensitive to everybody's time, as it is 7:40 right now. One of the people in my own life who taught me a lot about building a personal relationship with Israel and about his own interest in Zionism is one of my rabbis and teachers, Rabbi Gordon Tucker. He, for many years, led the synagogue where my wife grew up. He gave me an incredible access as a non-JTS trained rabbi to his brilliance and his teaching. And in 2015, he won an award from Masorti International for some of the work he's done in supporting Israel and in communal work. And he gave a beautiful speech, and I would play you his whole speech, but we don't have time. And one of the things he said was the following: It's not able to be read again, but I can read it. I know none of you will ever ignore the significant dangers that face Israel, both from other nations and from sub-state actors in its very harsh neighborhood. But while it's true that Jewish law always taught that pikuach nefesh, danger to life, must set aside other considerations, it never made the obviously false and self-defeating assertion that when there is one danger to life, other critical factors that are also vital for sustaining life somehow become unimportant. And so threats from Iran have not made the high-tech economy in Israel any less important. And anyone making that claim would rightly be dismissed as misguided. Threats from Hamas have never made Israeli medical research that benefits the entire world less important. So how could anyone believe that the existence of those threats allows us to play dangerously with one of the very cornerstones of Zionism, the creation of conditions for the flowering of Jewish expression, and thus for the fully requited love of all Jews? He gave this passionate speech 10 years ago. And in it he says that one of the things that has been a Jewish tradition for longer than almost any other is wrestling with the love of Israel, both the modern state and the ancient land, both in our exile throughout many generations and in our sustained presence in the land. There is a few features more Jewish historically than struggling with this place. All you have to do is look at some of the early books of our Nevi'im, of our prophets. I invite you to read both books of Samuel and both books of Kings and see how people struggled with their leaders even then. See how they struggled with the very idea of being in a land as opposed to wandering. What Rabbi Tucker is trying to teach us here is that while our struggles in this generation may be different than a previous generation, the struggle itself isn't new. It really is incumbent on all of us to help sustain one another as we build relationships with the land of Israel, with the people of Israel, and yes, with each other here in our community. Because there are too many people who come to me as a rabbi and say, I can't talk about Israel. I can't talk about Israel with my family. I can't talk about Israel in public setting in the community. I, as a fellow rabbi, can't speak about Israel from the pulpit. And that's sad. That's incredibly sad for me to hear. It's incredibly sad for people to feel. Because if there's one thing that Jewish communities should serve, that Jewish organizations should serve, it's for Jewish people to talk openly about Jewish topics. I hope that some of these skills have been helpful. I hope that some of the conversation has given you new things to think about. And I hope that just as we're all here gathered together from whichever synagogues we come from, that we can continue this conversation. This is not an end. This is just one point on an ongoing conversation that I hope will continue. I appreciate your presence here. I thank you for listening and for contributing, and also for your questions and your helpful stories. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thanks for coming out this awful day. It's rainy. Here comes Rabbi Farrell right now, but thank you for. I picked up more than a few thoughts here.
Either way. Yes, so thank you, Rabbi Shafran. I really enjoyed that, and I know that a lot of people got some things out of it. I don't know if you've got any additional time for questions or considerations, additional thoughts that people may bring. So we do still have the mic, and so if there's some additional pieces you wanted to add or ask about, you are welcome to do that. I also want to note that if you got a text from somebody panickedly during our evening and said, I can't get on the stream, we found an alternative link. There's a problem with the embedding on the video for some reason on our website. Don't know why, but we do have it up on Facebook, and it's also on our YouTube page. So I sent people a link to that. Hopefully everybody who registered got that, so if you got my spam in the middle of the session, that's from me. You're very welcome. I also want to say thanks for being here, but while I get a chance, I know that we don't always get a chance to see folks out of the Amberley ghetto. So it's nice to kind of have that here. I'll also say, we're very glad, I'm very glad to have colleagues and partner institutions that we can do this kind of stuff with. It's been really great so far working with everybody, and I'm sure it will continue to be great. So thank you to Rabbi Shafran.
Thank you. Thank you.
Questions? Additional questions? Next
call.
week. Yes. let me pull up my
next
my
week would
handy
be November
sheet here.
4th.
I will tell you. So Northern Hills folks, if you look on our calendar on our website now, I've added all of those. So if you look on our ShulCloud site, you will see them. They are all indicated as off-site events. So there's a little parenthesis. There's parentheses after the event itself. It says off-site hosted by. And we are November 5th. We will be at Rockdale Temple. We'll be hearing from Rabbi Kopnick. The title is very, very Kopnick. The Evolution of Zionism and the Reform and Conservative Movements in America. So it's a historical look at things on a topic that I know Rabbi Kopnick is passionate about. It should be a good session. Other questions, other thoughts, other concerns? Oh yes, very good. Good.
Is it going to be customary for us to get the slides if we registered? This one in particular, I actually want.
I'm happy to share out the slides. There's no
Great, thank you.
proprietary anything. Okay.
Thank you.
Drive home safe. Thank you. Thank you so much. Very good to meet you.
So Rabbi John is out of. Making a quick announcement, if you're missing an iPhone, if you have lost an iPhone, please see our head usher, security, our chair of our security committee, Barry Wolfson. There we go.